Ava steps onto the stage for the school talent show, her heart pounding as she faces the audience filled with students who have judged her for her clothes and her background. As she begins to sing, her powerful voice fills the auditorium, leaving everyone in stunned silence. The very students who mocked her are now captivated, their expressions transforming from disdain to awe. But the real shock comes when Ava's true identity is revealed, something that changes how everyone sees her forever. What happens next will leave her classmates rethinking their treatment of her in a way they never expected. But before we dive in, leave a comment and let us know where you are watching from today. And if this story speaks to you, hit that subscribe button for more amazing stories. The first day of school at Crestwood High was always a mix of excitement and anxiety, but for Ava Thompson, it was a day she had been dreading for weeks. Moving to a new town was hard enough, but starting at a new high school midway through the year was a nightmare come to life. She stood in front of the tall building, her worn-out sneakers scuffing the pavement as she took a deep breath. She tugged at the sleeves of her faded sweater, trying to make herself as small as possible. She knew she didn't fit in. Her clothes were hand-me-downs, far from the designer labels that adorned most of the students at Crestwood. Her family had fallen on hard times after her dad lost his job, and they had been forced to move in with her aunt in this affluent neighborhood. Crestwood High was nothing like her old school, and Ava felt the weight of being an outsider from the moment she stepped through the doors. The hallways buzzed with chatter and laughter, students catching up after winter break. Ava kept her head down, clutching her schedule as she navigated the unfamiliar corridors. She could feel the stares, the whispers that followed her as she passed by. She knew what they were thinking. She didn't belong here. By the time she reached her locker, Ava's face was flushed, her heart pounding. She fumbled with the lock, trying to ignore the group of girls standing a few feet away, their eyes fixed on her. "Nice outfit," one of them snickered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Ava glanced over, meeting the cold gaze of a girl with perfectly styled hair and a designer backpack slung over her shoulder. Her name was Jessica, and it was clear from the way the others hung on her every word that she was the queen bee of Crestwood High. Ava forced a smile, her cheeks burning as she turned back to her locker. She knew better than to engage. She had dealt with girls like Jessica before, girls who thought they were better than everyone else, who preyed on anyone they deemed weaker. "Is that sweater from a thrift store?" Another girl chimed in, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Looks like something my grandma would wear." The group burst into laughter, and Ava felt the sting of their words like a slap. She bit her lip, willing herself not to cry. She had promised herself she wouldn't let them see her break. As the day dragged on, Ava did her best to fade into the background, avoiding the curious stares and whispered comments. She kept her head down in class, scribbling notes and avoiding eye contact. It wasn't until the end of the day, when she walked into the auditorium for a school assembly, that something caught her attention. A banner hung across the stage, announcing the upcoming Crestwood High talent show. Ava's heart skipped a beat as she read the words. She had always loved to sing. It was the one thing that had brought her comfort during the toughest times. Back at her old school, she had been part of the choir, and performing had always made her feel alive, like she could be someone else, even if just for a little while. The principal stepped up to the microphone, his voice booming through the auditorium as he encouraged students to sign up for the talent show. Ava's eyes lingered on the sign-up sheet posted near the stage. She wanted to do it, to show everyone that there was more to her than the clothes she wore or the way she looked. But the thought of standing on that stage, with everyone watching, made her stomach turn. As the assembly ended, Ava found herself lingering near the sign-up sheet, her fingers itching to pick up the pen. But before she could make a decision, a voice cut through her thoughts. "Are you seriously thinking about signing up?" Jessica's voice was filled with disbelief, her eyes narrowing as she looked at Ava. "Please, spare us all the embarrassment." Ava's face flushed, her hand dropping to her side. Jessica and her friends stood there, their expressions a mix of amusement and disdain. Ava swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to say something, to stand up for herself, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she turned and walked away, her head down as Jessica's laughter echoed in her ears. That night, Ava sat in her room, staring at the ceiling as she replayed the events of the day in her mind. She could still hear Jessica's mocking voice, the laughter that had followed her down the hallway. A part of her wanted to give up, to keep her head down and just survive the rest of the school year without drawing attention to herself. But another part of her, a stronger part, refused to back down. She had always been taught that she was more than what people saw on the outside. Her mom had always told her that her voice was a gift, something that could bring joy to others. And Ava knew, deep down, that she couldn't let people like Jessica take that away from her. The next morning, Ava arrived at school early. The hallways were quiet, the usual chaos of the school day not yet in full swing. She made her way to the auditorium, her heart pounding as she approached the sign-up sheet. With a deep breath, she picked up the pen and wrote her name. The week leading up to the talent show was a blur. Ava practiced every chance she got, her aunt letting her use the living room after everyone else had gone to bed. She chose a song that was close to her heart, a song her mom used to sing to her when she was a little girl, one that spoke of hope and resilience. The day of the talent show arrived, and Ava could feel the tension in the air as she walked into the auditorium. The seats were filled with students, their voices a low hum of excitement and anticipation. Ava stood backstage, her hands trembling as she clutched the microphone. Jessica and her friends sat in the front row, their expressions smug as they whispered to each other, their eyes flicking toward Ava. She could feel their judgment, their expectation that she would fail. The MC called her name, and Ava took a deep breath, stepping out onto the stage. The bright lights blinded her for a moment, and she could feel her heart pounding in her ears. She closed her eyes, focusing on the memory of her mom's voice, the way she used to sing this song to her when she was scared. And then, she began to sing. Her voice started soft, trembling slightly as she found her footing. But as the song continued, something shifted. Ava's voice grew stronger, the notes filling the auditorium, each one more powerful than the last. She poured her heart into the song, her eyes still closed as she let the music carry her away. The room fell silent, the whispers and laughter fading as Ava's voice soared. She sang with everything she had, her voice clear and pure, the lyrics echoing through the auditorium. When she finally opened her eyes, she saw the audience staring at her, their expressions a mix of shock and awe. Jessica's smug smile had vanished, her mouth slightly open as she watched Ava. The rest of the students sat in stunned silence, their eyes fixed on the girl they had dismissed as nothing more than an outsider. As the final notes of the song faded, there was a moment of silence, a heartbeat where the world seemed to stand still. And then, the applause began. It started slow, a few claps here and there, and then it grew, filling the auditorium until it was deafening. Ava blinked back tears, a smile spreading across her face as she looked out at the audience. For the first time since she had arrived at Crestwood, she felt seen, not for her clothes or for the way she looked, but for who she truly was. After the show, Ava made her way off stage, her heart still pounding with adrenaline. As she walked down the hallway, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see Jessica, her face flushed, her eyes wide with something that looked almost like regret. "Hey, Ava," Jessica said, her voice hesitant. I wanted to say that you were really good up there. I didn't know you could sing like that." Ava studied her for a moment, the surprise clear on her face. She could see the uncertainty in Jessica's eyes, the way she shifted from foot to foot, as if she wasn't quite sure what to say. "Thanks," Ava said finally, her voice soft. Jessica nodded, her gaze dropping to the floor. I guess I shouldn't have judged you before. I'm sorry." Ava took a deep breath, her heart swelling with a mix of emotions. She had never expected an apology, least of all from Jessica. But as she looked at the girl in front of her, she realized that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. "It's okay," Ava said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "We all make mistakes." Jessica looked up, her eyes meeting Ava's, and for the first time, Ava saw something other than judgment. She saw understanding. The next day at school, things were different. Ava walked through the hallways, her head held high, and this time, the stares that followed her were not filled with disdain, they were filled with admiration. Students who had once whispered behind her back now smiled at her, some even stopping to tell her how much they had enjoyed her performance. Jessica and her friends were no longer the intimidating presence they once were. Instead, they greeted Ava with smiles, their attitudes softened by the realization that they had been wrong about her. For the first time since she had arrived at Crestwood, Ava felt like she belonged. Not because of the clothes she wore or the way she looked, but because she had shown them who she truly was. Someone strong, someone talented, someone worth knowing. And as she walked down the hallway, Ava felt a warmth in her chest that she hadn't experienced in a long time. She was no longer the girl trying to hide in the shadows, blending into the background to avoid ridicule. She had found her voice, quite literally, and with it, she had claimed her place at Crestwood. The days that followed were a whirlwind of change. Ava's talent had not only impressed her classmates but had also caught the attention of some of the teachers. Her music teacher, Mrs. Grant, who had been present at the talent show, approached Ava after class one day with a bright smile on her face. "Ava, I had no idea you had such an incredible voice," Mrs. Grant said, her eyes twinkling. "I would love for you to consider joining the choir. We have some exciting performances coming up, and I think you would be a fantastic addition." Ava felt her heart swell with excitement. Singing had always been her passion, but she had thought that those opportunities were behind her after moving to Crestwood. Now, she had a chance to be part of something again, to share her love for music with others. "I would love that, Mrs. Grant," Ava replied, her smile genuine. Joining the choir turned out to be one of the best decisions Ava had ever made. The other members welcomed her with open arms, and Ava quickly found herself making friends. Real friends who saw her for who she was, not for the clothes she wore or where she came from. They practiced together after school, their voices blending harmoniously, and Ava felt a sense of belonging that she had missed for so long. One afternoon, after choir practice, Ava was surprised to see Jessica waiting outside the music room. She approached Ava with a hesitant smile, her hands fidgeting nervously. "Hey, Ava," Jessica said, her voice softer than Ava had ever heard it. "I was wondering if you'd like to hang out sometime. Maybe grab a coffee or something." Ava raised her eyebrows in surprise, her heart warming at the offer. She could see that Jessica was trying, and that took courage. Ava had always believed in second chances, and she could see that Jessica genuinely wanted to make things right. "Sure, Jessica," Ava said, her smile reaching her eyes. "I'd like that." Jessica's face lit up, and for the first time, Ava saw her not as the intimidating queen bee but as a girl who was trying to learn and grow, just like everyone else. As the weeks went by, Ava's confidence grew. She no longer walked with her head down, she no longer felt like she had to hide. She was making friends, excelling in her classes, and feeling more comfortable in her own skin. But the biggest shock came during a school assembly a month after the talent show. The principal took the stage, his voice booming through the microphone as he made an announcement. "Students, I have some exciting news. Our school has recently been contacted by a major charity organization, and they have chosen Crestwood High to be a part of their upcoming fundraising gala. The gala will include performances by some of the most talented young musicians, and we are honored to have one of our own students representing us." Ava felt a flutter of excitement as the principal continued. "Please give a round of applause to Ava Thompson, who will be performing at the gala." The applause was thunderous, and Ava felt her face flush as she stood up, her classmates cheering for her. She hadn't expected this, hadn't realized that her performance at the talent show had made such an impact. As she made her way to the stage, her heart pounding, she caught sight of her choir friends smiling at her, their support filling her with warmth. But what happened next left everyone stunned. As Ava stood beside the principal, he smiled warmly at her before turning back to the audience. "And there's one more thing I'd like to share. Ava, would you like to tell them who your mother is?" Ava blinked in surprise, her heart skipping a beat. She hadn't expected this, but she knew that it was time for her classmates to know the truth. She took a deep breath, her voice steady as she spoke into the microphone. "My mother is Catherine Thompson," Ava said, her voice echoing through the auditorium. A gasp rippled through the audience, and Ava could see the shock on her classmates' faces. Catherine Thompson was a well-known singer and philanthropist, a woman who had made a name for herself not only for her incredible voice but also for her charitable work around the world. She had taken a step back from the spotlight in recent years, focusing on her family and her community work, but her legacy was still well known. Jessica's jaw dropped, her eyes wide with disbelief as she stared at Ava. The girl they had mocked and judged, the girl they had dismissed because of her clothes, was the daughter of a famous singer. Ava felt a sense of calm wash over her as she looked out at the audience. She hadn't wanted her mother's fame to define her, hadn't wanted to rely on her mother's name to fit in. She had wanted to prove herself, to show her classmates who she truly was, without any preconceived notions. And now, standing on that stage, she knew she had done just that. After the assembly, Ava was surrounded by her classmates, their faces filled with awe and curiosity. They asked her questions about her mother, about her own love for music, and Ava answered them with a smile. She could see the change in their eyes, the way they looked at her now, not with judgment, but with respect. Jessica approached her once more, her expression filled with a mix of awe and regret. "Ava, I had no idea," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I feel so stupid for the way I treated you." Ava smiled gently, her heart full. "It's okay, Jessica. People make mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them." Jessica nodded, her eyes glistening with emotion. "Thank you. And for what it's worth, I'm really glad you're here." Ava reached out, giving Jessica's hand a reassuring squeeze. "Me too." The night of the charity gala arrived, and Ava found herself standing on a grand stage, the lights bright and the audience filled with people from all walks of life. She could see her mother sitting in the front row, her eyes filled with pride, and beside her, her aunt and her new friends from Crestwood, all cheering her on. Ava took a deep breath, the familiar rush of adrenaline filling her veins as the music began. She sang with all her heart, her voice carrying through the auditorium, filling every corner with the message of hope and resilience that had always been at the core of her music. As she sang, Ava felt a sense of peace, knowing that she was exactly where she was meant to be, doing what she loved, surrounded by people who believed in her. When the final notes of the song faded, the applause was deafening. Ava smiled, her eyes glistening with tears of joy as she took her bow. She had come a long way from the girl who had walked into Crestwood High with her head down, trying to blend into the background. She had found her voice, her confidence, and her place. And as she looked out at the audience, Ava knew that she had made her mark, not just as Catherine Thompson's daughter, but as herself.